Okay, thank you for attending tonight's Environment Scrutiny Committee. Particularly, I'd like to welcome the members here tonight. Also, we're very lucky tonight to have Carolyn and Lee attending from the Cabinet. Also, Dean Sargent, Debbie Germany and Matt Powell, who will be presenting some of the reports to us tonight. So I really appreciate taking the time out of your evening to attend tonight's meeting. Just a few reminders before we kick off. So the meeting's being live broadcast on YouTube and is recorded. If you aren't speaking, please can you mute yourself just so we can ensure the sound quality for the meeting. Please can you use the raise hand feature if you wish to speak, and then I'll invite you to speak when that is appropriate. And we'll also have an officer monitoring the hands, so please keep your hand raised until we've noted you, so just in case I miss you. And please can you put your hand down as well when you have spoken or if you don't wish to speak. Yeah, so that is the protocol for this evening. So have we received any apologies for absence?
None received, Chair.
Brilliant, thanks. I think we're all here tonight, which is brilliant. Any declarations of interest? I'll take silence as, Conceptor.
Just Dorley Hamlets Local Nature Reserve. If it comes up for any reason, I'm secretary of that.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, Conceptor. Any further? No, brilliant. Minutes of the previous meetings have been circulated ahead of tonight's meeting. Is there any comments? Conceptor, just to clarify, is your hand still up or is it on the minutes? Okay, yeah, that's fine. Are we happy to propose and second? We've got a thanks Mark proposing and a seconder. I'm happy to second them. All those in favour of the minutes from the previous meeting? You can virtually thank you, Tom. Super. Right, the minutes are passed. So we will get on to agenda item 4, which is the on-street waste and recycling briefing, which I believe Dean and Debbie are presenting. So if you're happy, I can pass over for you to do that.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So just a brief introduction from me before I hand over to Debbie, who will just run through the verbal update through presentation, if that's okay. So just to really provide background and overview to the current street waste recycling and replacement of open concrete bins. We will give you a brief overview on the current trials that we've got across the borough to on-street waste recycling, as well as providing information on the on-street litter collection that's undertaken by our partner contractor, grounds and cleansing contractor, ID Verdi. We'll touch on some of the lessons learned that we've learned from our sort of investigations and contacts with other local authorities, as well as learning lessons from other sort of on-street recycling schemes that have been deployed across the country, and give some opportunities to potential solutions that we might want to take forward across the borough. So Debbie, if I could just hand over to yourself, if that's okay. I don't know if you're on mute, Debbie.
Right, sorry, can you hear me now? I'm going to share a presentation with everybody, so I'm hoping that this is going to work, and if you can let me know that you can see it. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, thanks, Debbie.
Right, so just really wanted to start with the containers that we initially started, you'd raised with us. There's some images here of our concrete litter bins, which are very outdated actually as a litter bin, because we now install litter bins with a raised lid to actually help prevent any animals or birds getting inside the container. And the raised lid is so that people actually don't have to make contact with any surface. So they are in random locations and are quite outdated. The container next to that litter bin is obviously our purple top household collection bin used for our recycling, which was introduced in 2014 and has proven very popular and has helped to actually increase our recycling performance because residents find it easier to use. As Dean's mentioned, we have spent time, and we do spend time with other local authorities. It's always good to get together and learn from each other's experience. And we also have the wonderful resource of the Waste Resource Action Programme. And they actually have said that from the lessons that we've learned, that it's always helpful to have a recycling litter bin which is common in design, so it can be recognised in the UK and also outside of the UK, so any visitor can understand how to use it. And as with everything, as we've learned from the purple top bin, it's make it easy to use, make it conveniently located, and put them in high footfall locations. And as we know, if we can actually achieve recycling from the litter bins, we will actually achieve a higher recycling rate, which will bring financial benefits. So we also know that the public are more likely to get it right and reduce the risk of contamination if we actually have a unit where we have a recycling unit, for example, glass, plastic and cans next to a rubbish unit, so people can actually naturally separate out any non-recycled waste. So that's in a nutshell what's been learned. In terms of the drivers and benefits, as we know, anything that increases recycling is good. Just to give you some facts and figures, our recycling performance is published and it's audited by DEFRA. We have to report every month on our tonnages, and we're expecting our 1920 performance to be published next month. So we believe that we will actually see our recycling performance increase from 44.8% to an expected 45.6%. In 1819, we ranked 137 out of 345 local authorities, and our recycling performance was above the average of 42.54%. In the previous year, we were at position 169, so we did increase our ranking by 32 places, which was good news. Since then, we have introduced food waste, that's good. That will help us improve our recycling performance again. And we are literally landfill free now. If anything, that where we recycle, we will also actually improve the benefits to the environment. So it will actually reduce our carbon impact. So it will contribute to our climate change agenda. So basically, just again to give you some context, CO2 saving from recycling food from September to June was 605 tonnes. If anything, that where we recycle will also actually improve the benefit too, since the contract started in 2014. And that actually has been through landfill diversion, increasing recycling, introducing food, any methods we can put in place. That's the equivalent of taking in excess of 10,000 cars off the road. So more is good, as we know. In terms of what happens now, we've got some recycling bins in the town park. We've got the Wellington town centre, we have one there as well. And we have a recycling container in Newport, and that's a trial with Newport Town Council, and that's coming very soon. And we're putting measures in place around communication, education and monitoring the success of that. We've also been trialling litter and the separation of litter that can be recycled in Woodside. And we believe that we've actually got a 30% out of the litter that's been collected, 30% of it could be recycled. So we're currently concluding the results of that. We are actually weighing that litter and actually working with Veolia, who actually accept the recycled and rubbish at Horton Wood. And so we are concluding the results for that. The litter bin practicalities, so the concrete bins, the locations may not be ideal for recycling on the go. They may not be in those high footfall areas, and some of them are in quite random locations because they are old. They're only small in number, and I do think we probably need to carry out a separate appraisal on the concrete bins. And we are working to actually get more information and data on our litter bins and the condition of our litter bins. The purple top wheel bin's great, and it's great as a household container, but it's not vandal proof. They burn very easily, actually. So if somebody was to put an unextinguished cigarette into that bin, it has the risk of going on fire. It also has a lid, and people would need to lift the lid. We also need to think about disability and the compliance, and everybody being able to access a litter bin. And we also need to think about something that's recognisable, which our purple top container is largely unique to us in Telford and Wrekin. And just to explain the difference between our partners, we have ID Verde that does our grounds and cleansing work, and they actually do our litter collection, and they also do our litter bin emptying. And it's them that ID Verde will need to work with in terms of keeping that litter and litter bin content separate, so we can ensure that when it gets to Veolia, who actually manage the collection of our household waste, that they can actually make sure that it remains recycled, and it does actually get recycled. Veolia do the household recycling collections, and they do it from a fixed address, and it's quite a fast-paced arrangement, so it's quite different to how ID Verde operate. But the link between the two is the disposal point that Veolia provide at Horton Wood. Here is an image of a litter bin in the town park. They can vary in cost, they can vary in design, and as I said, what we know from the lessons learned is the easier they are to use, the more simple they are, the better it is for people. So some opportunities. I think there's opportunities to extend provision in the town park, and also from the lessons learned, to actually make it simpler. To look at the high footfall areas and look at some provision in there, and for us to actually work with ID Verde, which we have been doing, and we've been learning from that, and how we can actually practically make things work. We have the trial in Newport, and the plan will be to monitor that and work closely with the town council and to put in place education and awareness. We also have the district parks, so you could consider these. We've recently achieved green flag status at Harts Hill and Dawley, which is great news, and we'll be working on green flag status for Dale End and Bowering. And what would be a really great thing to do would be to put in on-the-go recycling litter bins in those parks, which were popular before COVID, but they've become ever more popular because people are making much more use of our public open spaces. The other thing we can do is we could expand on the Woodside recycling litter trial and look at, from those results, we should be able to get some numbers in terms of the carbon reduction, the actual recycling performance contribution. And so if we can actually review those results and then look to actually start to roll that out into other areas. Considerations. We need to consider how we reduce contamination, and we've got a lot of available feedback that we've had, and RAP have helped to gather that as well. And it's promoting the benefits, and there's never been a better time for residents are much more engaged on recycling, wanting to do the right thing for the environment. We also would want to look at perhaps monitoring and how you'd actually want to establish a process. So my waste team could look at actually working on that and reporting on successes. The other consideration is the one-off cost. Containers and the type of signage on those containers can vary considerably, and the prices range from a starting price of £450 with an installation cost. With litter collection, we'll could continue to work with Vidi Verde to manage the quality of that recycling and the separation process for Veolia to then manage and to actually get that litter where we can recycle it recycled. And that's it. So I just really wanted to open it out to any questions or anything you feel I've not covered or you'd like to have more information in detail.
Thanks for that, Debbie. That's really, really helpful. Just before we start with questions, I'm just wondering if Lee wants to add anything or whether you're happy to continue with questions.
No, I'm happy to continue with questions, Gillian. Nothing really else to add. You know, Debbie's given a really good overview there of where we are at the moment and a couple of trials we've got on, and just really an assurance from sort of the cabinet perspective and particularly in terms of this portfolio area that, you know, we're always up for innovation. You know, what we do in terms of waste, in terms of environmental maintenance and highways and across this whole portfolio, we try and be the best that we possibly can. So we're always up for innovating. We're always up to you know, trying to take an idea from somewhere and trial it out. You know, you've seen the 2 trials in Newport and Woodside in particular. So really just that assurance that we want to continue this open dialogue, particularly with this committee, and keep it moving forward where we can.
Thanks for that, Lee. Tim, have you got a question?
Yeah, I mean, this is a publicly streamed meeting, so you know, we'll be measured about this. But thank you to Debbie for the presentation, and it's good that the council are looking to the future where people have an opportunity to separate recycled material on the go. You know, at the moment there's about 27 bins on Newport High Street, and they're all mixed residual recycle. So, you know, it's a good thing. The initiative's a good thing borough-wide. And the tone of Lee's message, just in terms of the open to innovation and so forth, and that Cabinet are wanting to work with, you know, pilots and trials. I appreciate the tone of that, you know, very much. That's the right spirit in my view. I'm slightly curious who on the town council, the borough council, is engaging with regard to the trial in Newport.
Well, I know Molly Hoop has been working with yourself, Tim, on this, and I know that you've been the point of contact. So apologies if I should have referred to yourself. Well,
it's not so much that, Debbie, because, you know, this is all a joint thing. Thomas Yanker and I evolved the idea of having a mixed, a parallel recycle and residual bin, and that was in discussions around the town council table. But the point is that the town council isn't paying for this bin. I am through my ward fund. Well, if it's, I mean, in the nicest possible way, if the project's going to be ascribed to the town council, then they can pay for the bin, because there are plenty of other people in Newport who could use my ward fund money. So I think we just want to be a little bit straight about this, to be perfectly honest. I find myself slightly compromised. I mean, I'm not absolutely sure why I've done this. You know, and Newport Town Council probably can't afford this. And there are bodies like Newport in Bloom or Sustainable Newport who can use my ward fund money. So I'm not sure where we're going.
You put the suggestion forward a while ago now, Tim, and we said we would work with you and support that. And I think it's a really, really great suggestion that you've made and great investment that you've made. And obviously any credit around that particular pilot, we would be working with you on that specifically.
Well, thank you, Debbie. Now I've mentioned it, you would be. Otherwise, it would be the town council. But don't misunderstand me. Don't misunderstand me.
I wouldn't take it personally. I think it's just, I wouldn't take it personally. I think Debbie's just trying to give us examples of what other areas are doing in Telford and Wrekin, and, you know, examples for us to look at as a committee. And I'm sure it's just an oversight.
No, don't misunderstand it, Julie. There are lots of examples where there are work that individual borough councillors are doing in particular areas, which are being, where the press opportunities are then presented to other councillors. Okay, the canal is a recent example. Okay, so we know that goes on. That wasn't about this. If we're going to engage the town council, I believe we should. In which case, we now need to make that dialogue happen. And to my knowledge, formally, that hasn't happened. That needs to come through to the Leisure Environment Committee of Newport Town Council, and the chair is Lynn Fowler. And then they will have the opportunity, which I shall present to them, for them to pay for the bin. And I'll use my ward funding for some money for something else. Don't misunderstand. I'm not being precious about this at all. We should be working with the town council. It's just, I'm just a bit conscious about where this has gone now. The second thing then, technically, is in terms of the material that can be recycled. When we're looking at the trial in Newport High Street, and I have asked, by the way, the officer to engage with me about being involved in the trial, and I've had no reply. I'm curious what we will be looking to try and recycle in the recycle part, because my understanding the big problem is paper contamination.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So if you got any detail on that, Debbie, that'd be useful.
So firstly, apologies if you have had a slow response from my waste team. That particular member of the team is involved with track and tracing. So she's a trained track and tracer. So she's balancing that with her role as a waste specialist. But I will pick it up with the team tomorrow and make sure you get a response. And the second point about the paper, Again, it is about keeping it simple, but actually often the paper is already contaminated, because if it's takeaway paper, it's contaminated by food. We can't recycle it. And if we try to recycle it, we're then in danger of actually contaminating a whole load of paper. I'm not sure how aware people are, but the actual cost and value of paper has diminished significantly. So the paper mills have got very, very fussy about what they will and won't accept, and they'll easily turn loads away. So in the interests of getting the quality right and keeping it simple for residents, we think the focus should be on what we would normally put into the purple top bin.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. That's very clear. This is the equivalent to a purple top bin, and that's the message people are going to understand because they're familiar with their purple top bin and paper doesn't go in it. Great. Thank you very much. That's useful.
But I will pick up the point about contact with yourself tomorrow.
Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Conceptor.
Thank you, Debbie, for all your hard work on the presentation, and it's nice to see what's going on so far. Just firstly, a brief point, if I could get more information about proposing this to Dawley Town Park, I'd be very interested to help the Friends group with that. The second point is kind of related but adjacent. Is there anything that we could do as a local authority to work more closely with brands that are guilty of creating a lot of litter within the borough? For instance, I would say one major fast food outlet is responsible, probably, on a by weight basis, for the majority of littering that we see in the borough. I'm not a gambling person, but I would put money on that. Other things like one wonderful idea that was proposed recently by a resident was with drive-throughs, putting vehicle registration numbers on people's receipts on the packaging for their takeaways. Just ways of creating a link between the person and their behaviour. I don't know. It's innovative thinking. But if we could be doing more with problem issues like that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. It's
Debbie,
sorry.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. I agree. I think the government have been launching proposals around how we can do more with companies for them to reduce what can't be recycled, and actually implement a tax to encourage them to be able to recycle more. But I think your point, Conceptor, about accountability is well made. And I think we'll continue to actually feed back on any consultation opportunities we get and any lobbying opportunities we get to actually improve on that further, because there's definitely room for improvement.
Thanks for that question, Conceptor. Gemma, have you got a question?
It's not necessarily a question. It's just I think with regards to litter, obviously the bins I would have a concern with. I think which Debbie's raised anyway. about if you've got someone going up to them with a wheelchair. And I know, obviously, during COVID, people won't necessarily touch stuff. And I know this may not be an ongoing thing, but it's there. I think it's going to stem for a very long time yet. And then obviously, I think with regards to litter, I think it is based around certain industries, but you tend to find certain areas. So when we've been out with Councillor Carter and Dean on our environmental walks, there is pockets where there's more than others. So it might be worth adding more bins in them areas than compared to others.
I think that's why we're really keen to actually, we've just put litter bins onto a system, and the operatives that empty the litter bins are actually completing a tick list. So we actually know where litter bins are getting the fullest, where they will need to increase the litter bin emptying regime. And I think we will be also getting litter onto the system in a more sophisticated way. And if we start actually using that data to more meaningfully work out where do we actually need those litter bins, where should they be, and where have we put them perhaps where they don't need to be.
Lee, would you like to come in? Are you on mute, Lee?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone hear me? Yeah, just on the point on fast food restaurants and litter, Councillor Cassar made. I know myself and Dean and Richard, Councillor Overton, wrote to all of the fast food outlets across Telford Wrekin earlier in the summer. It was most disheartening, you know, within less than 8 hours of fast food outlets reopening after the shutdown, to see boxes of food discarded at the side of the highway. Real disheartening. And we did write to the fast food outlets. One in particular has been quite responsive and is trying to work with us in terms of doing some of the community activity and trying to clean up some of the mess that's discarded from their restaurant. I've got to say that the rest haven't been so responsive, though, and we've not had responses from those from those outlets yet. We'll do as much as we can in terms of working with them, but we do need that sort of legislative change to help us so that we can be more robust on this.
Thanks for that, Lee. Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Carter's comments, really, in that the particular fast food restaurant has been particularly engaging with us and continues to do so, and looking to expand that into any opportunities around enforcement, you know, any links with receipts, etc., that might be found as part of waste that's, litter that's kind of disposed of irresponsibly. So just to kind of echo Lee's comments there, and then in relation to litter bins and Debbie's comments around gathering more data and intelligence and insight into usage of our litter bins across the borough. You know, we're working to make sure that we can optimise our approach to litter bin emptying and making sure that we are emptying, you know, dare I say, the right bin at the right time, you know, that it's not overflowing or that it's not empty, and linking in with any data that would be around litter that might be around the bin, whether that be through wind blown or just sort of discarded irresponsibly. So we're constantly gathering data and intelligence into that will inform our approach to how we manage and empty those litter bins across the borough.
Thanks for that, Dean. Mark, have you got a question?
Yeah, it's more and more observation, really. Like with our new estate, Lawley, the shopping area there, we've got multiple sort of fast food. We've got Greggs and Subway and the chip shop and cottage chicken and everything. And the bins on, you know, we've got a fair few bins over there, but they just can't keep on top of the waste because of, you know, at peak times like the weekend or even in the week, sometimes they're emptied and they're filled up again. So it's it's a hard one, really. You know, you can't like literally put a bin think there's 4 bins over there within, the sort of 250 metre square, and it doesn't cope because we've got that many outlets. Is that a normal problem in other sort of areas?
It's certainly an issue in kind of Oaken Gates as a high street on particular times, especially if there's an event. They just can't cope. But we do work very closely with the council, so that if there is an event, that we have like extra pickups or litter picks following that. So, but if it's a recurrent issue just on a general weekend, then I don't know, Debbie, if that's something you can pick up.
Yeah. I mean, just to reassure, where we've got the high footfall, what we call the zone 1 areas, those main areas, we will have a 7-day coverage, so a team will be going round. But Mark, I know in Lawley it's not all council owned.
Yeah.
So it's more complicated in terms of the ownership around that area, which means that not all of those litter bins will be emptied by the council.
Right. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Debbie. Vanessa?
Just a couple of questions. One on the design of bins. Are we taking into account other designs of bins, such as I've noticed around the Nedge there are bins that are quite frequently tipped over, their lever activated somehow. Whether that's a problem that we're aware of. And also there's a few bins in Oaken Gates where the design is particularly poor. The wind gets into the bin and pulls the rubbish out. And the other one I wanted to ask was, are we doing on checking on the impact of residents buying their own compostable bags for the food waste?
Right, okay. So the litter bins being pushed on their side, ideally they wouldn't be unless something really heavy has put force onto it. We can in some cases put a repair in. What we're keen to do around the information that we're gathering on litter bins is for the operatives to record where the condition of the bin. If there's different types of bins, for some reason there'll be some historic reason why that might have been put in, but I mean, we could look at any problem areas, and if you wanted to contact me, Vanessa, and let me know where they are, then we can have a look at that design, and if it's causing a littering problem, then we can look at alternatives. And in terms of the food waste liners, we've given residents it was Veolia's decision, and they actually issued a final roll of liners to residents. And what we'd be keen to see is that there is, it may actually make people, it's a choice for people whether they use the food waste collection service or not. It's something that they either choose to do. We would hope that people would want to continue to use it, and we will. There are other ways than just purchasing liners, of actually lining the food caddy. So, for example, any paper or kitchen towel, for example. It doesn't have to be a food caddy liner, and we'll be keen to ensure that. Veolia do have some recycling performance targets in their contract, so they are hugely incentivised to reach those targets, because recycling performance to us is beneficial for the environment, but it also costs twice as much if we don't recycle. And so for us, we reclaim that cost for Veolia not achieving their targets. So they are incentivised.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Is there any further questions? I think we've had a really good discussion. I think what it's shown more than anything is how complex the situation is with bins, not just the types of bins, but also, like Councillor Nelson raised, about contamination. And I think they're really legitimate issues which obviously need to be considered with steps forward. But I know since our first inaugural Environment Committee scrutiny meeting, this has been one issue which I think has very much kind of united the committee, and I think everybody, as you know, everybody spoke tonight spoke very passionately about. So I think from my perspective as chair, I'm really keen for us to kind of move forward and offer some recommendations to Cabinet. And I absolutely accept there are lots of complexities to work through in terms of how is it actually kind of put into place, how is it funded, and as Councillor Nelson has said, there's lots of different ways of funding it, be that through our own ward funds, be that through town and parish councils, and Councillor Cassar raised a really, I think, really exciting idea as well of actually getting businesses on board. Could it be sponsorship of bins in local areas, whatever it might be, but I think there's a real appetite, not just in this committee, but in the community as well, for us to be showing leadership as a borough council and saying recycling is really important to us. Going green is really important to us. We want to achieve that carbon neutrality. So I would really like to put forward the recommendation that we do move forward on the installation of those dual recycling bins at the very least, kind of in our high streets. And I think Debbie Germany raised a really important issue in our parks as well. So I want to put forward that recommendation, but obviously it's very much open for discussion. So if anybody's got any comments, ideas, Mark, I've seen you just put your hand up as well. It might be about something different, but Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a quick one for Debbie. You say they get penalised if they don't meet what we Viola and don't meet what they say. Who actually, is it an independent monitoring of that, or
no?
Is it...
No, me and my team do it, and Veolia are bound under the contract, so they report to us on the tonnages every month. It goes over a weighbridge, it's audited. As I've mentioned in the presentation, we report those tonnages to DEFRA. The contract performance is slightly different to what DEFRA will accept as our recycling performance, so the performance which is actually measured against other local authorities. Because there are some other materials that can get recycled, which we don't count in England as being recycled. So one example is incinerated bottom ash, which actually is almost 10%, would add almost 10% to our recycling performance. But we closely monitor performance with Veolia. That includes any missed collections, container deliveries, turnaround of bulk collections, and it's something we focus on every month, and we have a contract meeting with them every month. The recycling performance is reported at the end of the year because green waste is included within that recycling performance, and as we all know, the amount of green waste that's created depends on the season, and so that recycling performance fluctuates throughout the year, and then we get the true figure by the end of March.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great, thanks. With the bottom ash, that the recycling plant in Ketley is going to be taking that in from now on, will we be sending our local stuff there as well?
Sorry, say that again, Mark.
The Ketley recycling plant is being changed to take the bottom ash. That's the change of purpose has been approved for that. So will we be sending our local bottom ash? Is that
the Ketley?
Yes.
I'm not aware of that, because the facilities that we use, our general waste, our rubbish, goes to energy from waste facilities which are outside of the borough, and they are Veolia owned facilities. But as part of that process, when that rubbish is burned to create energy, and it's in a highly controlled environment, and that is very heavily regulated by the Environment Agency, it actually creates bottom ash, and that bottom ash is recycled, and then Veolia will actually recycle that bottom ash. But in Wales, when they actually report on their recycling performance, they're able to include that bottom ash in their recycling performance, which is why you tend to see some quite considerable differences between England and Wales.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks for your question, Mark, as well. That's really important. Conceptor?
Oh, sorry. Just happy to second the recommendation when it comes up.
Oh, thank you, Conceptor.
No, that was it. if you're looking for expressions of support, Madam Chair, to take place in Cabinet, we should extend the use of recycle bins in the public realm to give people the opportunity to do the right thing. Then naturally, I'm very supportive. People have got wide opportunities to recycle in their private realm, inside their own front drive. And if you extend that, then taking recycled by their car to the recycle centres, again, the private opportunity to do the right things quite widespread, whereas our opportunity to let people do the right thing, as it were, in terms of recycling in the public realm is only just starting. So the sooner we start, the better.
Thanks for that, Tim. Thank you. Are there any other comments? I'm aware we probably need to make our recommendation more smart for Cabinet, but I think it's really important that we express as a committee kind of our commitment to ensuring that we can recycle in the public realms, as Councillor Nelson has said. But I recognise there are clearly lots of issues we need to iron out. Anthea, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to suggest that perhaps if the committee were in agreement that you moved the recommendation, which has been moved, and then delegated authority to yourself as Chair to finalise the details of the recommendation to make sure that it is a smart recommendation that's going forward to Cabinet. It's a matter for members, but it was just a suggestion.
Thank you for that, Anthea. Any comments? Or are we happy? Is that for that as a way forward? Lots of nodding. That's good. I'm going to assume that Mark and Gemma are nodding. They're brilliant. I think it's a really important that as a scrutiny committee, we're doing something very proactive and really demonstrating where we want to see the borough to be in the next few years and push us in that direction. So I appreciate the support for the recommendation. And I also really appreciate Debbie, Dean and Lee joining us this evening as well for that presentation, because it's really, I think it's kind of showing focus on how complicated recycling and litter is, but also clearly there is an appetite within the Borough Council more widely for us to move and make progress on this as well. So thank you. Is there any other comments before we move on to agenda item 5?
Chair, just to be pedantic, can we just have a vote on the actual recommendation? I know there was nods about the suggestion it was delegated to you, but if we could just have a vote on the recommendation, that would be good. Thank you.
Yeah, if we use our raise hands, and then when it's recorded, we can see that. Is that okay, Anthea?
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. They're just going up now.
Brilliant. I think it's unanimous.
It is unanimous, yes.
Super. Thank you, everyone. So thank you, Debbie, Dean and Lee. You can escape if you wish.
Thank you very much, all.
Thank you so much for attending.
I'm here for the next item, Chair, so after.
Sorry, Dean.
It's okay, no
I didn't want to get rid of you. I'm aware that some members have also got to leave the committee as well, so Concepta due to childcare issues, so thank you to Concepta, but I think she's just left the meeting. Right, without further ado, agenda item 5, which is the transport briefing. So following the discussion at one of our previous committee meetings, transport was outlined as an area which members were particularly interested in terms of our kind of carbon action plan. So I think Dean and Matt, is it Matt? Yes, yeah, presenting this one. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of background, it has been, as we know, a challenging 2020, and particularly for Matt and the team who have been, initially supporting the response to the flooding that we experienced at the start of the year, and then the COVID response, forming a key part of the COVID response via the council. As we moved into recovery through the summer and the establishment of our recovery, reform and reset, programme. The transport actions relating to the carbon neutral action plan, we're really kind of front and centre. So although there has been a challenging period in relation to priorities, there has been significant progress made in relation to this, and hopefully members would have had the opportunity to have seen the report that is contained within the agenda and the 11 transport actions or transport related actions that are contained within it. Matt's just prepared a short summary really which complements the report, so we do have each of those actions within this presentation, and then a brief overview just to provide a bit more context in relation to progress that's been made to date, and more specifically next steps where action and progress is perhaps not quite where we'd like it to be at the moment. So Matt, if I could just hand over to yourself for now, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, evening everyone, thank you very much Dean for that introduction. So as Dean touched on, I'll kick straight into our kind of 11 key actions. As we go through, you'll see some of them are quite broad. So although there's 11 there, there's probably quite a lot of depth in some of them, which I'll try and go into for you. So if I start off with our first action is around implementing a corporate travel plan and looking at how we travel as our own business. So since early 2000s, we have had a corporate travel plan, although it hasn't been refreshed for a few years now, so it's time for that to happen anyway, as well as with the context of climate change and the need for us to go more carbon neutral by 2030. Also conscious around the impact of COVID and how that impacts our travel and our day-to-day lives, because it touched all of us by the fact that we're in a virtual meeting now as opposed to in Addenbrooke House, and that will have a profound change on how we all travel anyway. So we're conscious of that impact. We're just discussing at the moment how and when is the best time to bring forward that study alongside kind of things like accommodation and kind of how we travel to work. It also links into a couple of wider priorities. So I've touched on there. We're starting to liaise with particularly West Midlands Railway on how like salary sacrifice schemes could work to kind of help our own work transport, whether it's for travel between offices or travel to work. So that could be either bus or rail. We also are kind of involved in that as well, and also looking at how we might kind of rekindle the car sharing system that we used to have, because we used to have a journey share system and a website shared with Shropshire, which looked at how employees could travel kind of to and from work and kind of matching up them into journeys. So we're looking at how we could bring that forward again in a COVID context at the right time. So it's probably fair to say this one is more in its infancy because of where we are at the moment, but it's we're starting to look how we'll bring it forward. Okay. Moving on to kind of more active travel for our own employees. We have previously operated cycle to work schemes, which the transport teams looked after. Kind of saw take up of those wane a little bit. Kind of over the last 18 months, where they're operating, and we haven't operated something for the last year. Partly kind of thought that I was conscious of how we were running it, and say transport we're kind of trying to launch it and push it across the authority, but it probably wasn't as kind of cross-cutting as it could be. So as a result, the organisational delivery and development team have taken that on with colleagues in human resources and are about to relaunch that scheme to staff. So we're really hopeful that can bring forward more active choices for our own staff, getting kind of to and from work and travelling for work business as well. And that clearly that one links into our first priority quite closely around kind of wider work travel. Okay, moving on now to vehicles. So the next point is around the replacement of our pool vehicles and with ultra low emission vehicles. So there's a bit of a rough overview. We have just shy of 100 vehicles that are operated by the council. It's about 50-50 split roughly between kind of fleet buses, so there'll be the red integrated transport buses that we see going around the borough working on our school and community bus services, and then our own kind of more small van type vehicles, either through highways, cleansing, enforcement, those kind of services. Pleased to say that hopefully within the next 2 weeks. Just waiting for delivery on the first of our new fully electric vehicles. So that's 6 electric vehicles coming in to highways and enforcement fleets, which will take us to about 16% of our small van fleet being fully electric. So I think that's a kind of really good news story. And we'll just wait once the charging points are in over the next week or so. That'll be something they'll be up and running, and let's say take 6 diesel hire vans off the fleet. Looking longer term for that, we're working with Energy Savings Trust on what we do with the rest of the fleet. So we've been able to access government funding through the Energy Savings Trust for that review to be undertaken for us. So no cost to the council, but it's looking at an overall view of our fleet, what they're used for, what's available on the market now in terms of vehicles, what's coming in the next year, 18 months, as there's quite a large change in vehicles that are coming to the market in that period as battery technology is getting better, more original equipment manufacturers are bringing more kind of range of vehicles, not just cars, to the table. So having that report and that experience is going to be really useful for us, and it'll help educate how we go forward and how we may want to invest in the wider fleet. Linked point there, kind of moving on to around charging points. So this is more looking at public charging rather than our own vehicles that we've just looked at. Early on, after we declared a climate emergency, we'd put our prior information notice out to gain information on how the market might kind of respond to this kind of procurement to bring charging points into Telford. As Dean kind of touched on with the challenges we've had this year, not just in the team but also on the market, with different suppliers being kind of closed down, kind of furloughed and the like. We haven't kind of progressed that over the last 6 months, but are now looking to shortly bring that back forward. So that procurement will look to attract an external operator into the borough to provide, maintain and operate charging points which are publicly available on a commercial basis. Obviously wait to see what the tender says on how that may operate, but we are hopeful that we'll be able to start seeing charging points other than the very small number of private points that we've got at the moment can be deployed. Again, once that's up and running, we'll look at where gaps are in the borough. So conscious that a commercial operator will come forward and hopefully offer a level of cover, but we're under no illusions that won't cover the whole area. And so we do see as a future investment plan there of how we roll that forward after the initial, hopefully private investment. Okay, I've touched earlier on kind of our fleet service and the vehicles we operate. We're also just about to start a commission to review all of our transport operations for the authority. So this is principally around kind of the efficiency and cost effectiveness of the services, but also goes wider there. If we're delivering smarter, then it also gives us the hopefully wider benefits around climate and environment. So this will look at kind of the 4 areas I've highlighted there. So our community transport, our education, adult social care and subsidised bus routes, looking at those holistically, at how we deliver them, potentially who delivers them, and making sure we're operating in the most efficient way. So that's likely to be a 2 to 3 month minimum, possibly longer study. We're challenging the providers that are supporting us to come up with innovative solutions and kind of really challenge the way we do things and make sure we are embracing all opportunities available to us right across the transport piece. And we've made some decisions internally to kind of support that of creating an integrated transport team as of the 1st of October. So I think previously transport services have delivered over a number of areas of the council. They're now under one umbrella, kind of helping moving us towards that one efficient goal, hopefully. So I'll quickly touch on another kind of internal scheme we've got here. So again, our corporate organisational delivery team operate a car lease scheme for council employees. Throughout the year, usually we would be promoting that scheme, and we wanted this year to specifically promote the uptake of ultra low emission vehicles. As we haven't been able to do the roadshows, clearly that hasn't happened, although as of next week the team are launching a specific internal comms message around those vehicles, so hopefully that'll drive some more take up of ELEVs in our internal business. so moving back onto kind of charging infrastructure, we've been working with a company initially called with GridServe, who have been looking at providing effectively electric fuel stations. So if you think your traditional petrol station, but doing that with for fully electric vehicle charging. Initial kind of work around that has been reviewing what land might be available that could be council owned or private, and how we might attract that investment. Which we haven't been able to kind of get to a point where we're providing it. If I can provide you an update on, yes, we've definitely got any land that's available or is suitable at the moment. Although we have just recently started engaging with a local company who's looking to do a study on that for us and do that kind of market testing and see if there's something that's viable there for either ourselves or the market to bring forward these flagship sites. They're very, very new to the UK. The picture on the bottom of that slide is from the planning of one of the first sites down in Braintree. So I think we're, if possible, we're quite keen to bring forward something like this in the area and be innovators in the area if we can. Moving on to more kind of active travel areas now. So this action was around looking at either e-bike or publicly available hire bikes, probably more aimed at kind of the commuter or people who haven't got their access to their own bikes. Similar to, like say, the Santander scheme in London, and a number of other larger cities have now starting to kind of roll these schemes out. West Midlands Combined Authority have been trying to do similar for, let's say, the last 18 months. So we've started to engage with suppliers on launching a feasibility study with a view to launching a trial in this area. Not entirely sure on where that area might be as of yet, so that's why we're commissioning the study. Although to make it successful, we do know that it needs to cover residential, employment and transport sites, just to give a wide range of kind of attractions really for users. So when that study is available, we can share more detail, but hoping that we should be able to bring something forward specifically around the kind of borough towns, hopefully. I think as I touched on at the start of our presentation, some of this action specifically is really quite broad. So I'm conscious that there's quite a few points I'm going to kind of throw out with this one. So it really covers kind of a wide range of transport solutions and of what we're doing from a day-to-day basis. So I'll very quickly go through these, but conscious there is quite a few. So this is effectively the day-to-day work that we're doing around sustainable transport. So first element is on best deal for buses. So late last year, the DfT announced, I think, 3 different tranches of bus funding that the authority could bid for. One was around kind of rural mobility and changes of services. One was around electric buses and creating an electric bus town, and another was around creating bus kind of superhighway networks, so bus priority and taking out significant road space for bus travel. So at the time, we'd worked with colleagues in the council, cabinet members, and partners at Arriva of which one of those bids that we would be suitable for. When we did put in a bid to the rural mobility element, so that's looking to provide or to hopefully attract, I think, around 3 million funding to look at either mobility in the rural area around kind of where subsidised routes possibly aren't moving towards commerciality or success in other areas, and access to the areas like the hospital. At the moment, the DfT haven't advised when we may hear from that. I think it's been on hold due to COVID and the impact on public transport and patronage at the moment. But we'll keep working with the DfT on that, and whether there's anything we can bring forward. Similarly, on the next one, Restoring Your Railway Fund, again, it's a government fund looking at bringing old railways back into use, whether it be for passenger service or kind of other uses like rail. So currently working with Shropshire and Haworth, so the developer at the Ironbridge Power Station site, for a bid to look at the existing freight line running from Medley Junction down into the power station and how that could come forward as a sustainable route in the future, as opposed to relying solely on road transport. Sorry. And looking back to kind of active travel, as we've seen through the pandemic, the government has issued a number of kind of funding opportunities around cycling and walking specifically. So we're successful in our first round of funding to the Emergency Active Travel Fund, which has delivered, I think, about 170 car parking spaces for bikes in the borough so far, and we're hoping to push that closer to 300 by the end of the project. And we have got a second bid in at the moment, which it looks for kind of flagship cycle parking hubs. So they're kind of enclosed cycle parking areas with CCTV and access control, those kind of things, to make cycling more accessible as a commuter option potentially. So, and as well as then looking at a link on the A518 between Clock Tower and Lushall, linking up some of the existing national cycle route network. Again, it's a bid with the DFT that was supposed to be announced a little while back, and we're still working with them on when we might receive the funding for that. Looking longer term around cycling and walking, in 2018 we released our cycling and walking strategy. So we're planning to refresh that this year. Partly in terms of that's kind of where it is in its lifestyle, in its lifetime, that it should have that refresh, but also in contexts of where we are now, kind of COVID and government policy changing and around cycling and walking. So looking to refresh it, and we'll launch a consultation this year to support that. Again, conscious that we don't just design a strategy and it doesn't involve people. We want kind of long-term engagement with people on that. So we're looking to kind of develop long-term user groups, relaunch the cyclers using group, those kind of things, as well as just taking the initial feedback. Linked into that with Telford Bike Hub is very much part of that cycling and walking strategy. So for those not aware, the Telford Bike Hub was a facility in the town park that used to be operated privately, and the council took over operation in 2017 after that private operator pulled out. Initially we've offered kind of family bike hire from there, as well as leading our road safety education, cycling, kind of bikeability training, those kind of things from the hub. It's probably something that has been relatively low key to date, and probably hasn't done quite as much as we would like from there. So we're developing plans at the moment to relaunch that next year, alongside the, as I've already mentioned, the kind of commuter orientated hire scheme, having that as a more of a kind of family friendly kind of training orientated offer. So I hope to have more on that early next year for you. So a few more on this kind of in this broader one. So around cycling and walking map, we've got kind of long-term aspirations to improve our offer in that area, really to kind of help access to that network. So we've started now initial work on making an interactive map, as opposed to the kind of paper only map that we'd kind of issued in the past. The thinking there being that people can load this map on their phone and have it when they're out and about and be able to access that information kind of a little bit easier. Longer term, we would like to develop that into something wider through an app or through more interactivity. But initial stages will just be get it online and available to use. Okay, so moving next on to kind of our return to school 2020. This has been a real challenging project for us over the last kind of 8 weeks and ongoing really on a day-to-day basis, of making sure that we've got as much of a public transport network available and accessible to get our students back into school as possible. Bus transport has recovered relatively well in the borough, that we're somewhere between 60 and 80% patronage depending on service. That being said, with kind of social distancing on services, it has been very challenging to make sure that we provide enough space on the buses without parents kind of reverting back to cars and then potentially getting that behaviour then getting ingrained. So I think we've in the main we seem to have done that, and patronage continues to increase. As a positive, not something that's being seen everywhere. So I've touched briefly on road safety education before. Through COVID, that was a service that we kind of completely shut down and was redeployed into other areas. But we're now starting to get quite a lot of engagement again back from schools, specifically around bikeability and stepping out. So it's really positive to see that training kicking off again. Not just because we're providing skills into our schools, but also kind of embedding that kind of those active travel thoughts kind of within families. Then finally, on public transport, just wanted to touch on our bus infrastructure improvement programme. So we've over the last 18 months, we've looked at starting to replace our bus infrastructure and making public transport more attractive, not just from kind of on bus from work or either doing, but also conscious about our street furniture and that not necessarily being the most attractive. So that's in terms of shelters, but also information. So shelter replacement is ongoing, but we've also rolled out real-time bus information at a number of key locations, and that's kind of screen based. So we've got that at Telford Central, Oaken Gates, and Telford Town Centre. But I've also looking to roll that out wider at transport hubs going forward. We've also rolled out QR code based real-time travel information on quite a number of the core Arriva routes now. So that sees a QR code at a stand, which a person can scan on their phone and get real-time information for that stop. So we hope to roll that out to the rest of the network kind of over the rest of the year. Can I finally touch on a couple of rail initiatives that we're working on? So the first one is stations as places. So this is a project kind of jointly with West Midlands Trains, where we're creating station prospectuses effectively. So kind of we're going forward looking at how we would like the station to work going forward, kind of with the community. And I think we've had the first 2 workshops, so with the 3rd workshop this week for Wellington, on what we would like the station to do for our areas. So whilst that might not generate us kind of finance straight away, and it provides that outlook for the station and enables us to work with partners to deliver those improvements going forward. Having said that, I think there is some short-term wins that we found with West Midlands Trains on lifting the stations that can be done short-term through the existing franchise or whatever comes after rail franchising. And then finally, the Wellington Station Access for All, just wanted to mention, so we're working with Network Rail on that at the moment. It's a Network Rail fund where they've committed to put step-free access into Wellington Station. It's still being designed at the moment, but we just want to make sure that isn't just a case of putting lifts on the platforms and doesn't look outside of the station boundary. You've got Wellington Bus Station right next to it, but not great connectivity, especially from a disability point of view between the two. So we're keen to work with Network Rail to achieve something more holistic there. So I think that's all my kind of my initial briefings, and conscious there's a lot of information there that I've glossed over at quite a high level, so apologies for that. So with your permission, Chair, if you're happy for any questions, we're happy to take them.
Thanks, Matt. That was exceptionally comprehensive. So I can already see hands popping up. So I think there are a few questions. Tim, actually, I think it's Tom got your hand up first. If you want to come in.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for that, Matt. It was very insightful. I think one of the points you raised, which I think is quite important, is this modal shift away from using the car, particularly right now. I think with a pandemic, I think as horrible as it is at the moment, provides this committee and this council a great opportunity for us to look at future sustainable transport solutions and moving away from the car and touching on the active and sustainable travels to school. You'll be aware of the different schemes, in particular in and around schools, such as school streets and stuff like this. And I've been speaking with Sean Skelton, I think was on your team, about this over the last few months. And one of my biggest concerns with those schemes initially is the improvements to the existing infrastructure in regards of widening pavements for cycle coexisting with walking and stuff like this. And I was just wondering what was, if anything, in the pipeline in respect of improving existing infrastructure so we could enable safer and more frequent shifts away from the car and more cycling and walking into schools.
Yeah, I think the consultation that we're launching shortly is going to be really key to that, of making sure that we're targeting that investment in the right areas, and developing that investment plan over the next few years in those key areas, because it's conscious that as officers we can put forward what we feel is the right thing to do, but doesn't necessarily always going to provide for our communities. So I think I hear your point, and think we definitely do need to create those investment plans and invest in the right areas for our communities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Monster of a presentation. Thank you. Very, very comprehensive, and right from the start, it's right to say it's encouraging to see the council is, addressing such a wide range of different initiatives to create a more sustainable transport future that addresses carbon emissions, but also health opportunities, and people to experience some of the benefits of exercise if that's regarded as being beneficial. So it's very good to see that wide range. So within that there are a number of points to come out, and very firstly I'll echo what Thomas has said in terms of the improvements to infrastructure of the existing rights of way, either for walking or for walking and cycling. And indeed, if we could look at the capacity the council has to address public rights of way issues, because sometimes there may be, it may not be as easy as it always you'd wish it to be able to address public rights of way issues in terms of capacity with the council. So if I could just mention that. Looking then, things that occurred to me, salary sacrifice was mentioned a number of times. I've asked the council to just be conscious of the equitable nature of salary sacrifice. Salary sacrifice benefits higher rate taxpayers massively more than lower rate taxpayers. And I just want the council to be aware of that. It's not to say you shouldn't do it, but you've got to look at who it benefits. You mentioned in terms of active travel and modal shift and commuting away from the car, and you mentioned e-bike hire. I'd ask the council to consider e-scooters. There's no mention of e-scooters, and yet they're a real hot ticket issue and a great opportunity, which the council, I think, ought to look at. I was encouraged to see that there's a proposal to improve the cycle link on the A518, and there was specific reference to the clock tower to Lilleshall. What I'd say here and now, I've probably got more experience than most of cycling between Newport and Telford. I don't know of anyone else who's cycled every day to work for 10 years, but I have. And crossing the 518 is a huge issue, and it needs sorting out. It's not easy to know where to stop, so I will stop now. But what I'll say is just one other thing, and that was in terms of school transport and wanting to encourage parents away from their cars and to use, for instance, buses, which are clearly the opportunity to be much more sustainable. And so the council's free school transport policy in regard to faith schools and grammar schools has an unintended consequence that it will force parents who are not entitled to benefits but are not well off to use their car to take their pupils to school because the bus is denied them. But otherwise, thank you very much, Matt, for an excellent, very comprehensive, and as I said, very encouraging to see so many different initiatives. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Tim. I did forget to invite Dean or Carolyn to come in after the presentation, so it was very comprehensive though. So, but if there's anything you'd like to add?
If I can, Chair, if that's okay, really just to echo some of the comments that we've heard already, but really that there is the opportunity, particularly from the active travel that we've seen, and we're very much, hopefully, the presentation that Matt's just gone through there and focused into the action plan, that we're very much in tune with the opportunities that are attached to that, and trying to bring forward particularly those active travel measures and the funding that's available to deliver that for us. So nothing further to add.
Thanks for that, Dean. I had a question kind of about electric. Oh, sorry, Carolyn, if you come in first.
Thanks, Julie. Just to say, I mean, just picking up on the point about rights of way, the definitive map is due to go live fairly shortly, sort of on the website, so that makes it a lot easier for people to see where the rights of way network is. We obviously have put in increased budget into rights of way for further investment in improvements on the rights of way network, and also we recognise there's quite a lot of definitive map modification orders in the system at the moment, so the process of dealing with those has been sort of reshaped so that should make that move quicker than it has up to now, which is perhaps where one of the issues that Tim might have been concerned about. The other thing I just wanted to say really was obviously there's, as Matt gave a really thorough update there, and there was an awful lot that is happening in the transport area, and I know that's been a huge concern for a number of members, not just on this committee. One of the things that I've wanted really from the outset with the climate change action plan, the carbon neutral action plan, is that it remains a live document and that we update it much more readily than we have done. And I think part of the problem this year has obviously been with COVID and so many other things, and certainly officers then being redeployed. That hasn't happened, but we will bring in back an update in February to Cabinet, and from then on really what the intention is that we then have the action plan on the website in a way that it's much easier to kind of update as and when things move along, so that there's a much more current feel, and so that everybody, the public as well as yourselves, are fully aware of where we're at with all of these actions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. I think that's really helpful as well. And I think you're absolutely right to say, perhaps unlike many areas of the council, it changes very rapidly, and we need to be, ultra responsive to that. So that's really good to hear. Just a question about kind of electric charging, and about whether the council has considered kind of electric car charging stations as a commercial arm of the council, because obviously at the moment I know that perhaps that it isn't as popular, but it is going to be, and I think we can quite confidently say it's going to be an area which is going to grow massively over the next decade or so. So whether we can consider it as a commercial arm of the council, and whether we could potentially partner with other companies like building houses and so on, so that the infrastructure put in at the time of development for new developments, but also whether, because we know it is going to be an area of growth, whether we can kind of put the investment in now so that we can profit from it in the long run, which would therefore fund other areas of the council. And I'm not an expert on this, so I'm quite happy to be shouted down. But just whether it's been considered, and if it has been considered, if it's been discounted for one reason or another. I don't know who would like to answer that one, but I'll throw it out there.
I mean, from my perspective, Matt, if you could sort of chip in, but there is opportunity, and that will come out of the review that Matt outlined in relation to the grid serve, Matt, I think he said. So that there's potential opportunities around that, and certainly that can be looked at. And then in terms of sort of future proofing for that infrastructure, I do see that very much forming part of the current sort of local plan review and the policies that go around with that in terms of opportunities there for that infrastructure to support the future of EV, etc. So yeah, certainly opportunities to be captured.
Yeah, if I just come in briefly on Dean's first point there, if the offer that we're looking at the moment around charging points is to attract private investment, which may, depending on tender, offer a return to us. I guess there's a balance to be had of do we get into operating and kind of having that maintenance liability, or do we partner with someone? But I definitely hear your point on that, Julie, and something we can look at for you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Dean. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think there's quite some interesting points raised about the electric vehicle charging points, especially the like the petrol station version of it, and it was looking at innovative ways or areas to put this such a thing. The Newport Innovation Park would be an absolutely ideal location for something like that. It's just off the A41, plenty of passing traffic, especially if you're looking at a commercial point of view as well, plenty of usage. It's exactly the kind of thing you'd want in a new innovative industrial sector as well. So something to think about, I think.
Thanks for that. I think I kind of continue on the electric charging. I had an interesting conversation with Carolyn last week about it's something I'd never even considered until Carolyn raised it about obviously if you live in terrace housing or you don't have drives for parking, actually trying to get an electric car poses the issue of how do you charge it if you don't have your own driveway. And I think I hadn't considered it before Carolyn raised it, and I think that's a really important point because it's a very legitimate barrier for lots of people even considering it as an option. And I suppose I'd be interested to see kind of what work we're doing with developers to prevent that from being an issue in the future now, but also kind of what work we're doing on existing estates to kind of combat that problem as well.
Yeah, so just in terms of the existing sort of issue, we're looking at, we're engaging with all the local authorities who have a similar problem, and it seems that there are various options out there in terms of there's not one size fits all. So we're looking to develop an approach that's fit for ourselves in terms of the existing infrastructure, and then for, as I said, new developments and linking in with developers. It's essentially, as I said previously, it's making sure that we've got that infrastructure in place to support the EV of the future. So that's all ongoing at the moment.
Thanks, Dean. Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that as well, obviously a big issue with, particularly with new developments, and making sure there's enough grid capacity, because actually there are some significant barriers in parts of our borough where the grid capacity, the actual national grid is at capacity. And so Western Power Distribution are going through their consultation at the moment in terms of understanding what our future aspirations and plans are, so they can then look at how they then develop the grid over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So we're feeding into that. I think there's a local plans team are leading on that to make sure that we've got that. We're working with Western Power to make sure the grid capacity can then meet the demand that we hope we will generate over the next few years.
Thanks, Carolyn. Are there any further questions for Dean, Matt, or Carolyn? No, looks like you answered all our questions, Matt. So good work. Thank you for attending. And I think you can see that there's clear interest in this area. So we do appreciate your time, and especially the time you put into such a comprehensive presentation as well. Carolyn?
If I can just say one last thing, and I think I say this every time I kind of come to this scrutiny committee, but obviously we've got a set of actions there and Matt's updated you. But as I've always said with the carbon neutral plan, if there are other actions that you think we should be looking at, and you've mentioned a couple of specifics tonight, but that those are the things that we want you to feed through, so we can then look to how they can fit into the plan, and just make sure it is. It's an open document. It's there for you to feed into, as well as members that are not on this committee as well. Thank you.
No, we appreciate that, Carolyn. Thank you. I think you've very much demonstrated it is an open door policy, which we really appreciate as members and as a committee as well. So you can escape if you so wish, but thank you again for attending. We really, really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Agenda item 6 is the work programme review, which I believe Anthea is very kindly going to run us through.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members have the agenda, work programme at page 19 of your agenda pack, so I'm not going to share it on the screen. So the first item is an all-encompassing item, I think, which is climate change emergency and plastic-free Telford and Wrekin. But then the detail connected to that covers a lot of things that are contained within the climate change action plan. So what we'd agreed at the first meeting was that we would pull items out of that to focus on, and we've seen that happen today with the transport and the waste recycling items. There is an intention to bring an item on plastic-free Telford, and the progress that we've made to date on that. I haven't yet got a date because we had hoped to bring it to this meeting, but then the agenda was quite full, as we've already seen. So we're in the process of liaising with officers to see if we can agree a date where it would work to bring that back to the committee, and possibly December is the date that's been mooted at the moment, but we'll keep that updated as we progress. The next item is the monitoring of implementation of contracts in relation to waste and recycling. Debbie touched on this in her presentation when she was talking about key performance indicators. So we've got the item for the waste and recycling, and then also a similar item for the grounds maintenance contract. They're both proposed to come in February 2021, and the plan is that will be a report on how the providers have performed against the KPIs in that contract, and also whether there's any lessons learned since the contracts have commenced, and any areas of good practice that we can extend wider. So at the moment, that's February 2021. The next item is the one that we've had today, which was waste receptacles. So I'm not going to go into any more detail on that one. The next one is floodwater management. I think we discussed this at the last meeting, and we were talking about bringing back a report in relation to flooding response. I think Carolyn at the last meeting had mentioned that there'd been some improvements made to enable the response to flooding to be more targeted to the appropriate locations. We had initially, or the committee had initially looked at February to March, but hopefully not. But that might be a period of time when the flooding response team is quite active. And so there has been a request from that team, if that can be deferred, to enable them to make sure they've got enough time in case they do need to engage and mobilise. So the proposal for that will be post-March, taking into account the pre-election period, then potentially that will be the first item of the next municipal year, but we're keeping that under review because come March we'll be in the pre-election period. Then the final item, I've already touched on that, which is the grounds and cleansing service contract procurement. And again, that's a report in relation to the contract monitoring, the performance against the KPIs and that sort of thing. So that is a quick rundown. I'm happy to take questions if I'm able to answer them, but some of them might have to be referred to other officers who are not in the meeting today.
Thank you for that. Is there any questions on the work programme or any particular parts of it? No, I think I think we've got a clear view of where we're going over the next, well, the rest of this municipal year. So hopefully we will be having a meeting in December, so that we can receive that update on plastic free, because I believe the team have been doing an awful lot of work which they're really keen to share with us. But also I think it's important, obviously COVID has kind of shown this issue through a different prism, and I know that the climate is a central part of kind of the recovery from COVID as well. So I've asked for them to kind of give an update at the next meeting as well, kind of the links between the recovery from COVID and the climate as well. So hopefully that will be the December meeting, if we can get a date, which hopefully we should be able to. So I'm hopeful. And then obviously February we've got those really important updates, which I think members will be really keen to see the data from those key contracts we have as well. But yes, that is the work programme. Thank you for that, Anthony. I was really you definitely did it better than I would have explained the work programme, so I appreciate that. So last agenda item is Chair's update, which I kind of just did. I should have said it, but yeah. So there'll hopefully be a meeting in mid-December. Is there anything which members would like to see on that agenda kind of aside from the two things I've just mentioned, or are we okay to kind of proceed with the work programme as it stands? I'll take silence as agreement. It's very disconcerting, isn't it? So I appreciate that. So I think without further ado, that is the end of the meeting. So thank you everybody for your attendance this evening and for posing such really important questions. And I think we've managed to get through a huge amount this evening as well. So I do appreciate it. Anthea? Thank you, Chair. I don't want to delay matters further, but I just wanted to thank members for their patience at the start of the meeting. It's these things happen, but I'm sorry that it took some time to get started. So thank you for your patience, and hopefully we'll resolve any issues for the next meeting. Thank you to Kieran and Stacey as well for working through it and endeavouring to get us online. So we do appreciate everybody's work, and we absolutely get it's new to all of us, so there's going to be teething issues. But no, thank you everyone.
All right, thank you.
Good night. Thank you.